Welcome back, everyone. Episode 3 of the S1E1 podcast. I'm your host, Jay Gags. I'm here with 4 of my oldest friends, Gordo, Nick, Ferg, and Joe. Each week, we're going to go back and watch the very first televised episode of a various sitcom, and we're just going to discuss it and tell you if this is a show that we would have greenlit or canceled. For this episode, we will be discussing Home Improvement. Everyone need to get that out of their systems now?
There will be more.
Oh my God.
So, Home Improvement lasted 8 seasons on ABC. It had 204 episodes. We're going to be discussing just the very first episode, which was creatively enough called Pilot, and it aired on September 17th, 1991. So just to start off as usual, have any of you never seen Home Improvement leading up until this week?
I can't believe nobody would, right?
Yeah,
I actually never saw that episode.
I would have
Pilot,
thought
but-
that nobody would have ever not seen Friends, but as we learned a couple weeks ago, that very much can happen. So I figure every episode I should at least try to put that out there early on and see if somebody didn't see it.
No, I've seen the show and I did remember the episode more than I thought I would, honestly.
I
did
didn't
too.
remember-
Spoiler, we watched the whole season last year in order, so it's hard to kick it out of my brain, but we watched it all when I was young, but then we rewatched it all last year.
But
You
to
have it
stay
on
on
DVD?
brand, we will only be focusing on this episode, and we will be erasing any knowledge we have of other episodes. So episode 1 only, starting from the beginning, right at the intro. I love the intro. The intro is iconic, but just to watch it even for the first time, quote unquote, I love everything about it.
It's, dude, how good is the music? The music is so well done for that intro. Usually these campy fucking sitcoms are just like this generic crap, but this I felt like was like very unique to the show.
Yeah, just an instrumental piece, pretty simple. I love the transition effects. It's like you get right off the bat, it's a family show. You know that he has something to do with being a handyman. I don't know, like if it would be relevant later on in the show. You see that he's wearing a Detroit Lions shirt, so you know the show potentially takes place in Detroit. But yeah, just pretty cut and dry intro. Tells you.
I think it just takes place in Michigan. I don't think it necessarily has.
I don't know if they,
Detroit.
I don't know if they tell you where. I love too in the song that it ends on the button of the.
Yes.
I literally instantly laughed.
Every time I
Second
hear
heard
that,
it.
I laugh.
It's a tough one. Yeah, it's hard. This is a harder one for me to erase knowledge of. I'm gonna do it every moment of it. I laughed through the whole thing of
Me too. Yep.
the whole episode, and it was
Me too.
Yep.
very enjoyable.
The show starts, you see their house, and the first thing that flagged to me as soon as they cut to it is this doesn't look like a typical sitcom house, which I loved. It looked more realistic. The layout was just a little different, and something about it just really, it resonated.
Yeah, because usually you see they're set up in a sense that each room is its own set, right? So they would go from living room into the kitchen, and they're all these boxy shapes that they just, perform in, basically. This one is like a very wide open set, which I really like.
Yeah, the house is an open floor plan. It seems more realistic.
I also think they did that because they get to this further in the episode too, but I also think they did this to kind of give the impression that they're not poor people, right? Like they're
Yeah.
this is
they're
a nice
successful.
house. Yeah, in a nice area and things like that.
Yeah, like I wouldn't say it's no mansion by any means, but it's a nice house.
I like
Yeah, it's
I like how the
for-
backyard is also kind of incorporated too into that set as well. You have the whole layout of the house, and then you also have the back door that's open as well, where you could see the kids running around and you could see the neighbor and so forth. I think that's kind of a cool thing to do with that.
Yeah, the glass doors is a nice touch so that you can see outside. It gives more depth, and you can get a better scope of the whole set and their world.
And right from that intro to the house, we cut right to a show within a show. So we see that the main guy in the show, the dad, happens to be a television host and has his very own tool show. So it's just a cool dynamic. It gives you, I don't know how to put it. It was just something different that you don't see on every show. It's like every character has a job. Every main character has a job, but this was like, I don't know, it's just fun to have a show within the show.
Well, that was one of the things I noticed, and I couldn't really think of another show in a sense that most sitcoms start in a way that the husband comes home, right? And he was at work, and that was really the end of his job at that point. It was all about his home life. This does a really good job of mixing the both of those. They do a lot of his job and a lot of his home life.
Yeah,
And you don't
so-
see that very much, I don't think.
So I'm trying to think of the shows that incorporate media like that, like Mary Tyler Moore, right? Like that was in a television setting, and like Full House, Danny Tanner.
Yeah, say Wake Up San Francisco is a good example.
But
So
they don't lean on that very much. They don't go to his job very much. Where this is, as soon as the show starts, you know that this is going to be a big part of the show because they're introing you with it. They're giving you more tool time than they are Home Improvement to start the show.
well, so
So
I
it's a
think
great
that-
trick too that I love is they show it on the TV and then you're in
Yes.
the
Yeah.
set.
Yeah.
That pulls you right in. There's no awkwardness. You're not watching it in their living room. They show it, you go right in. It's like when they say Armageddon in Russian in Hunt for Red October and they all speak English.
Yeah.
Perfect move.
But what I think is different too than like say for like the Mary Tyler, like because you can do workplace like that exists, right? You have plenty of shows like that. But when say Mary Tyler Moore was at home, she wasn't on her typewriter doing work, right? But when Tim Taylor is at home, he's still doing the same stupid shit that he was doing on the show. He brings it with him, which I like.
Yeah, you get that that's his whole life and you can't walk away from it. He's that
Yeah.
character.
Yeah, the man does what he loves.
We've done it as soon as I mentioned the name of the show, and then the grunting, it's something, it's very infectious, and then you can't help but do it yourself, and it's like, what is that, like that was
So the first grunt came, if you don't count the intro, a minute 40 into the show. But you also have to remember Tim Allen is a stand-up comedian, and that's where it came from.
Right. That's part of his routine. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say it had to come from there, but I mean, if you're just watching in a vacuum like we are, I don't get the grunting. It's funny as hell, but I don't get the grunting.
yeah,
at all.
you don't, like, to go back to when we were kids, when the show was live, like he wasn't a huge stand-up, like he wasn't like wildly known in every home up until Home Improvement came out. So
But I would say the level of
I-
Seinfeld at
Fine.
that point, right? Like Jerry Seinfeld, like
He was
he's
the
a bigger
Santa
comedian.
Claus,
He's
damn
not
it.
on TV like Sam Kinison or somebody all the time screaming. But
yes.
Right.
So I think
He's
for
there
most
now.
people, the gets introduced to us through this show.
I don't know. I always took it as like, it's always like he's got the whole manly thing, and that was just him like a caveman, almost like.
Yeah, and I have that written down too. It's like something that hits you extremely early in the show is like, he's a masculine character, right? That's something that they established very early on. He's into tools and grunting, and like he's a man.
More power.
Even to the point where he's like constantly like kind of womanizing his wife too, when is not, as entertaining, but she gives it back. So it doesn't really come off as super shitty.
Yeah.
yeah, they have a bit of a witty repartee, but it's still a little rough.
No, I can't stand Jill.
One thing I liked about Tool Time is that they created such a complete show. Like we talked already, show within a show, but Tool Time is established. They put a lot of thought and effort into creating that specific show on its own, where like you could have easily watched a half-hour episode of Tool Time. There was
I was
enough
gonna
meat on the bone.
I was
You
gonna
know-
say I wanted a Tool Time show.
So watch the
After
Red Green
watching
show.
this.
Oh, we'll get to the Red Green show eventually. Do
Mhm.
not worry about that.
But,
Barring Red Green, though, that show doesn't exist. Like you have like This Old House and the Yankee Workshop and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But those were a lot of like on sites and stuff like that where they're fixing houses and stuff like that. This is very obviously a studio audience show. And I don't think, as far as I know, Home Improvement in fiction is the only thing that's ever really done it.
It's an interesting
Yeah.
concept, right? Like you think of like, oh, I want to go in the audience and watch Maury, or I want to go in the audience and watch a game show. But, like,
Right.
who wants to be like, I want to be in the audience to watch this guy mount a door? Like it's just
Well, no, back in the 90s, though, they had those kind of infomercial shows with the,
Yeah, I
with
guess
the
the
studio
infomercial.
audience where that thing was made to sell Binford tools. And that's
Yeah.
why everything it was. But
But is
I
it-
was always curious because clearly he doesn't know what he's doing, or like he has a bare minimum, always messes up. Is that show supposed to be taken serious, or is it like.
Well, it's hard, right? Because we're watching the
Did they
first
see this
episode and we
guy,
don't
like-
know he's going to continually mess up. He messes up a lot at home, but we don't really see the mess ups at work yet.
Well, we kind of did, like, right off the bat, the first time we were introduced. So we have Al, who's his number 2 guy in the show, who plays the straight man to his kind of wildness. Right off the bat, the first episode of Tool Time you're seeing, there was a standard, what I can't remember specifically what it was, but whatever tool he was supposed to use, he wanted to use the more powerful version of it. So it
Was
was
it
like
an auger? I think it might have been an auger.
It was a big
Yeah.
ass drill.
Yeah,
That's
so,
all
I mean,
like.
So we established that right away with Tool Time, and then we cut to the home life where he's doing the exact same thing he does on the show. So this is who he is, and now it's the dishwasher that he wants wants to beef up.
I was going to say, I don't get that this is an infomercial. I don't know if it's quite supposed to be comedy, or I think it's supposed to be just informative. Tool Time is supposed to be an informative show, and he just happens to be this kind of
That's exactly
idiot.
That's exactly what it is, because you have to remember that this isn't the Tim Taylor show. This is a Binford Tools show.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
Binford
sponsored.
is the one creating the show, and Tim just happens to be the host.
Right.
It's
He
made to
happens
sell
be the-
tools. It's made to be serious.
He's the he's the personality behind it. And it's interesting to think like outside, to overthink, what we are supposed to do in a sitcom, but like, how does a man like that receive this job if he's not?
That's why I
completely
questioned,
qualified?
is it meant to be a joke or not? Or did someone just say, this guy's got it?
Like, what do you think Tim Taylor went to school for? Like, is he some sort of like media guy, or is he an engineer of some sort? Like, what did he
Because you
do?
don't find out the backstory in this episode, so you have to just sort of guess, and you figure he must have been some master craftsman when you first see the episode he's on TV.
Right, but this leads you to believe that this dude was going on like some sort of not interview. What the fuck did actors do when they go for
Audition.
yes, did he go
Yeah.
and like audition for this? Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think when you're watching, you can't imagine. He's a very like, he knows enough, like he can talk about all this stuff. Like when he's talking about his dishwasher at home, when he's talking on the show, he knows what he's talking about, but he just gets in his own way. Like he overshoots it, because they make it pretty clear, especially at home, that he constantly messes up. Every time he tries
Yeah.
to fix something, they have to call the fire department. Track record of failing over and over and over again. But this is still his livelihood, is that he's a tool man.
It's kind of a great conceit too, right? Because if you're the kind of person who is a really good carpenter, you're a really good construction worker, whatever, you're handy, right? This is funny for you because you're like, look at this guy messing up. I'm enjoying this. But if you're a regular person who likes to do this stuff and enjoys it, but you're just not that good at it, it's also really relatable too, right? Like, how many times have you messed something up that you wish you could do, right? Because that's how I feel about it. I'm like, oh, I really appreciate what this is, because I want to do more in my house. I have a Sawzall and I can't believe I have 10 fingers still.
You know what it is like, he messes up a lot, but he knows what he does wrong. So it's not like he's not clueless. The part, not to get ahead of ourselves, but when the dishwasher blows out the backside, he immediately says, oh, you forgot to tighten like a nut or something, whatever piece he says.
But no, he was just blaming Mark. I don't think that was actually the issue. He was just making it. He was trying to pass the buck in that instance, I think.
Maybe.
But to that scene too, right before that, when he's trying to figure out the ground, and he's like, yellow, the sun is yellow, it heats the ground, it's the ground. Pre the internet, if we didn't have phones in our pockets, that's something that would have happened to probably most of us. Maybe not Nick.
No, I would have just shut off the whole like house.
I would have
Instead
felt
of
like it was too
guessing.
dark to work without the lights off, and done the exact same thing he did.
I was going to say though, but he's very knowledgeable especially when he's talking about the compressor and he's going through all the parts of the compressor.
So he knows
No,
his
he just
specs.
knows-
So
Jay, what's
yeah.
up, Jay?
Well, finish your thought. I was trying
No,
to
no,
give
go
you
ahead,
a
go ahead. I
non-verbal
don't-
cue
it's not-
that I was trying to talk when
I know,
had a chance,
go
but
ahead.
If you would like to do it this way, we can go ahead.
Go ahead.
What I wanted to say was, as we talk about this, I think the weird thing about his character is you instantly like him, but he shows you very little reason to like him. At work, he's advised, don't do this, to the better judgment of his coworker, doesn't listen, does what he wants anyways, and fails, leaving them to pick up the pieces. At home, he does the same exact thing. He doesn't listen, he fails. Even early in the show, Jill has to go for a job interview, and she's just like, I need you to be home to do this, or can you, I forget what basic task she asked him to do. Like, I think it was
Watch
just
the kids.
And he gave her a hard time. And you're like, she just wants to, she has a job interview. Like,
Listen,
her-
but
her
you don't
husband-
think that's the most relatable thing, though? Nobody fucking wants to watch the kids, right? And
Yeah, but, like,
in every
there's a
show,
time
it
where-
just like happens. But I like that he was just like, no, I'd rather do something else, right? Like,
Yeah,
I
but
feel
isn't
like
there like a
that's
point where like it should be somewhat, it's relatable, but you pick your battles. So when your wife is like, I'm doing this thing that's very, very important to me, like I need you to watch the kids for a little while, and they're not infants, so it's like she's
Yeah,
just basically saying sit at home and make sure they don't die.
See, I didn't.
Yeah, but I think you
didn't
get the
take
point that he doesn't
serious.
pick his battles and he can't pick his battles.
So I just thought when you look at all these pictures up front early on, he doesn't give you a lot of reason to like him.
They're also
I still
they're
like 'em,
also
though.
they're also driving the chauvinism across, right? Which at the time wasn't as big of a deal. So that was was more accepted, that's what they want him to be. Like that was an accepted way to be, regardless of whether or not it makes sense now. But I think that was the point they were trying to get across.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and one
this
thing I noted
is
too, that the show's oddly
masculinity.
sexual for 1991. There's a lot of references to, was it the last thing you said in bed to me was no, and there's jokes about them
Yep.
having sex later on, and there's all this sort of, she gets him naked by the end. There's a lot of
There's a lot. I think a
surprising
lot of
sexuality for an
sitcoms-
ABC sitcom from 1991.
I
They
think a
had
lot
the
of
battle with
sitcoms play off of
Married with
the
Children.
wife won't sleep with the husband. I think that's kind of a lot of shows lean on that.
I think it's just because it's also so true to form. You know what I mean? Like, the further into a marriage you get, the less that happens. So, and it's on a lot of people's minds who are married. So they're going for the base, right? They're trying to get viewers based on them replicating reality. So in these senses, I think they are doing that right.
As far as adult like humor, one note I had was on multiple occasions with different people, he makes a butt crack joke. And I wrote at one point in my notes, I wrote another butt crack joke. Why? like that's such a weird, you don't hear people say butt crack very often. So for him to go to that
I know it
joke
sucks.
multiple times, it's just so weird to me. I'm like, why?
That's just a stereotype for that profession. More plumbing than anything. But you think of that with construction work because their asses are always hanging out.
It's the bending
Right.
professions. The bending
Yeah.
professions don't lend well to the butt crack. They make that. What are the shirts called now? The Duluth Trading Company makes a special shirt for workers that goes longer in the back so that when you bend over,
They're
it's
just
like
like
a
dad
ducktail
bod
shirt or something.
shirts.
I was going to say, to go back to Nick's point a little earlier, do you think that this show, because I have this written down in my notes, do you think that this show would fly today?
No.
No.
I think
A
you
version
could
of
do
it
this
could.
show, but you can't say things like these plates have little sissy flower patterns, or you can't say some of the things that he says to his wife. I mean, I guess you could in some ways. It depends on the tongue in cheek. It depends on Jill's a different character. I think she's stronger in this than most female leads are.
She
I think
goes
in a lot of
toe-to-toe with
shows.
them.
But I feel like she'd have to be.
She's sassy.
But I feel like also when you have a kind of male chauvinist protagonist in the story, you have to humble him within all the episodes to make that work, right? If he acts that way towards women or whatever, and it comes off wrong, as long as he's made to look like the fool,
And there's no repercussions for it.
yeah, as long
Yeah.
as he's made to look silly for being that way, then it balances. But you can't be that way and succeed throughout life. That's when
Yes.
it looks bad. So they're not celebrating his chauvinism.
I think
Right.
the most you couldn't do now is him and his son having their shirt off together and making butt crack jokes. That's the one thing that aged worse than anything
Yeah, and
else, I
not to
think.
be like too meta about it. I don't think this show would fly today, but I also don't think it shouldn't fly today. You know what I mean? I feel like these networks are just so worried about getting canceled over one thing or another that they restrict all the dialogue to a specific set of things, and you wouldn't be able to do this today. But having said that, I think it brings out more humor overall, which is what you don't see nowadays. It's all just there's a lot of crap out there because of that.
That's what comedy is. It's saying inappropriate stuff and making you uncomfortable. And it's like, oh, I can't believe he said that. And
And
It's
yeah,
shining light on the fact that they're doing something wrong. That's
Right,
what-
For
yes,
sure. And that's what
yes.
makes it funny,
Yeah.
and everyone can take the joke out of it. But also, to your point, Nick, that's kind of what Tim Allen's new show, or I think it just got canceled, but the last show he was doing was like that, right? Because it sort of falls under all the categories of
I made
improvement,
three
but
seasons, right?
a little more right wing.
A bit longer than that. We'd have to look it up.
I think
Man
8 or
Fire.
9
It had
seasons.
a nice little run.
I don't think the general subject
we'll
matter
cover it.
was the issue, was the problem. I think it was he was injecting a lot of that right wing stuff into it unnecessarily. And it just at this point in time wasn't the right time to do it.
But
Yeah, that show was interesting too because it started before a lot of the current political stuff happened. So it was just kind of like a ha ha ha, he's this character. And then,
Yeah.
because we watched all of that show too. And once you hit a certain point where it got political, it got a little heavy handed. But I also think it worked because of that. You didn't have to like the character, but you
Right.
found humor in it.
Well, there's a certain safety, and I don't want to make this a whole episode of Last Man Standing.
No, save
But
it for when we
Or
do
when
the
we do Last Man Standing, yeah.
And we will.
But I think what happens with any show like that is, anytime a character is outspokenly politicized or anything like that, it's a very tight balancing beam, and you're going to divide your audience, right? So you have to find a way that the people who agree with the character's presented in a way that you still like them, and you have to and now this is whichever way you go, left or right, if you don't agree with the character, they have to flaw the character enough that you can root against them. It's like, it's a really tight act. And I think that's why a lot of shows wouldn't want to go that route, because the margin of error is very small. You can very easily mess that up, and it's just not worth it like that. And that's what it comes down to. It's just not worth that kind of a balancing act.
Yeah.
I think that they balanced it perfectly with this show, though, as you guys
and
noted.
it was obviously a very
It
different
did.
time as well. But I want to go back to the show.
Yeah, back to the
A few
show.
a few times we meet the neighbor,
Wilson.
So the thing with Wilson is there's like 3 or 4 different scenes where you meet Wilson throughout episode 1. The first time you may happen to notice that you don't see his face, but it's not like, maybe it was a one-off, right? Just the situation where he was standing. As you go through this episode, you realize this is a thing. You're not going to see this man's face for whatever reason. And I kind of like the mystery that went with that. You're not going to see this guy's face. You're not going to know why. And that's fine. It's a weird quirk of the show.
Yeah, I like that.
That's the kind of thing too that seems very piloty, right? Like you have this weird thing. They say the kid doesn't work out, change the actor. We've got this guy who's a neighbor. We don't see his face. The kids aren't reading that. It's not working. Change that. But it stuck. It took, right? And we know that with hindsight, obviously. But I love the idea of taking weird, bold moves like that, and the fact that they do work out, because you see that a lot if you watch like a pretty well-known sitcom or something. You watch the actual pilot, and the cast is sort of half different, and you see these ideas they went for that they got bullied out of. So I like that they went with this and they kept on to it.
Yeah, and I think it's weird because like he's very much the old wise man, and he's the man that Tim is going to go to for advice over and over again. Even as early as episode 1, multiple times he went to him for advice. You can see that he's a well-traveled, well-educated man. He seems to know a bit about everything. Tim plays this ignorant, goofy character to it, who kind of, when he tries to relay the lesson learned from Wilson, he's going to flub it up. He's going to say things the wrong way. But
How do you spell that?
so I like the dynamic. He's almost like a father figure to him.
Mentor
Is the word. Thank
Good
you.
Midwestern folksy
Gotcha, bud.
wisdom.
Yeah,
My
and
only,
I like the vibe it brought to it too. It was very philosophical for a sitcom, and I feel like that's due to Wilson, the neighbor. I don't even think we know his name. Yeah, Wilson. I think they did say it.
I think they say it pretty early, yeah.
But that's definitely due to his influence and his interactions with Tim. It kind of brings it to this meta philosophical level that most sitcoms don't get.
Yeah, he's Tim's like moral compass almost. Like he helps him, because I think morally Tim wants to be the guy who's just like, fuck it, I want to do what I want. And Wilson's the guy who's there to be like, hey, here's why you can't.
Life is hectic. There's people all over the place. Things are insane. And then Wilson is zen and soft and slow.
Yeah, and it's kind of an interesting dynamic the way they do it too, because they meet in the yard. So it's like Tim, who typically messes up wherever he goes, right? When he needs a moment to step away, like literally step away from the situation, gather his thoughts, he can do that via his yard and talking to his mentor. And so it's kind of a figurative and literally, like, that's how he goes about it. I just think it was a nice dynamic for the show. It takes a break from the wackiness. It gives you, but still remains silly because of the anonymity of the character.
You know what? A question I had too was, because we're talking about Wilson, who is a side character. I, at this point, would not have considered Al a main character, right?
He doesn't get as much screen
He's got
time.
one scene on the whole show episode.
The opening scene is the only time you see Al. And I think, we're going to discuss this all the time, ignoring the future episodes, but I feel like they should have injected him a little bit more into this episode, especially considering what he does become for the show.
Well, I think they're introducing you to the world, right? So like I said at the top of the episode, we're learning within a minute that tool time is a big part of Tim's life, and it's going to be a big part of this show. So we do learn that Al is a part of that. So we know that he's most likely going to have more meat on the bone as time continues, but also, like, to go back to what Joe was talking about earlier, it's a pilot, and that could be one of those things where they didn't want to overly have him be part of the first episode, because he could have easily been a character that got cut, like, moving forward. He might not have been a mainstay on the show.
Yeah, and they at least show him, because they mention, not Heidi, I know we know the names later on, but they mention the female.
I forgot her name, and I wanted to say it was like
Lisa.
Yeah, I was
Lisa.
gonna say, I thought it
they
was
mentioned her, and you
Elman.
didn't even see her. So yeah, they sort of just give you an
you
idea,
did.
a glimpse of the world.
Very quickly.
I think you only heard her and then saw her in a glimpse.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
might like hand him something, like when the auger or whatever.
Because she
Yes.
does everybody know what time it is?
Yes.
And Jill mentions her later when she talks about her, like, her boobs.
Lisa already has a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great line.
And that was the other, like, when I spoke earlier about Tim's not, you like the guy, but he gives you no reason to like him. You know, I talked earlier about his unwillingness to help out when she needed just him to watch their kids so she can go on the interview. When she doesn't get the job and he finds out before she does, and he doesn't know the right time to tell her, which is fine because that's understandable. Like you're waiting for your moment. But when the conversation happens, he shows no sensitivity towards the situation. And you're like, how does he not realize that she's crushed in this moment, that she didn't get this job that she felt so confident that she was about to get?
Well, I
No,
think
he-
that's go ahead, Ferg.
I was just saying that's more his way of trying to comfort her. He's telling you don't have to work. I make plenty of money for both of us. He's trying to be there for her, but he just doesn't know how she's feeling about it.
Yeah,
She wants to be a strong woman who, work.
And that's where I feel like they highlight the disconnect between them two, because Jill really wants to work, right? That's what she wants to do, and they make that very obvious.
What an idiot.
Yeah, right. No shit. But I think that they're also, in the same sense, trying to highlight that Tim knows that he can support her and provide for her, and he wants her to know that she doesn't have to work, right? And they both don't understand that about each other. She wants to work. He wants her to do, whatever she wants. She doesn't have to work, blah, blah, blah. He can support her. And that's where they kind of butt heads. He doesn't understand that. She doesn't understand that.
Did you find it interesting that in the show, we established that they have 3 sons, but really only one of them has any significance to episode 1, where the other 2 exist, and we know that, but they really hardly get looked at.
Well, that's
or
not
say
true.
anything.
They talked to 2 of them, so you don't. I can't remember. I know their names, but I can't remember which one is.
Randy's
Mark,
the middle
Brad.
one. Brad's
Randy
the
and
older.
Brad.
Right, because
And
you
then
see
Mark.
JTT and he has the turtle shell scene. So he gets like a moment where he's like, I found this turtle shell. They make some funny jokes about it. And then you get the scene, obviously, with the toolbox and the tool belt and everything. But the oldest son doesn't get any specific scene, which is interesting.
I was going to say, that's what kind of made Tim actually likable. You could tell he was a good dad.
Yeah.
And just a good family man. Maybe not towards his wife. He means well, especially when he's, talking to the sons and he's like, oh, well, we got to, fix this. And, you don't want to be sitting around naked. And they're like, all right, yep, we're out. You could just tell he's like a joking, kind of fun, easygoing dad.
That's also one of the funnier, weirdly sexual jokes, too, is when Wilson says that turtle shells are aphrodisiacs. And he says, wouldn't that hurt putting it on? Totally lost it.
Wilson, who I think right around that same point of the episode is making squirrel to eat.
Yeah, he's cooking squirrel.
He's barbecuing squirrel, yes.
And it was like,
Catch of the day.
you understand that this character is interesting and there's a lot of layers to him that hopefully in time we will learn about. But the idea of eating squirrel was so like, it almost took me out of it, like out of the episode for a second. We were like, this is too weird for everything else going on.
Well, I think it's because he doesn't seem old enough to be retired, but he seems like that retired guy. He's just like filling his day with things he wants to do or things he's interested in. And you kind of get that right off the bat when he's like planing a door or he's, cooking squirrel and stuff like that. This guy clearly has a lot of free time, and that's why he's there.
But how does
Well, it
one
makes sense,
acquire
though.
squirrel meat?
Well, if you're cooking squirrel, you're obviously nuts. And your jokes are obviously corny.
Yeah. So is he a squirrel hunter?
See, in my head, he
An
like
old
knows.
trapper.
In my head, he knows a guy who sells squirrel meat.
I feel like that's a kill of opportunity in his yard. I'm sure he has like sort of weird, crazy trap or something. Because he's set out to be like a very sort of Scandinavian Midwestern guy. Like he says he trades something for snow tires and an accordion. Right. Like I feel like you're supposed to guess he's sort of like maybe like a Scandi family of that sort of old, cold, trapper people.
There's just something about, and again, it's just something about making squirrel that turned him from wise old man mentor to he might be a serial killer, and we'll find that out later on.
Yeah, like I should build a bigger fence between him and my kids.
Maybe that's why the fence is like 7 feet tall.
That's the weird thing you see in a lot of these sitcoms, right? Is you have to give somebody that kind of quirk.
Yeah,
Where it's like, hey, this guy is really smart. He helps Tim through the day. He is who he leans on, but he does something crazy and wacky too.
Yeah, and I would
like
say
they can't let that not be a thing.
Especially to think of the time, like we said, it was 91 when the show comes out. It's very, very common to have that kind of abnormal character be a presence on a sitcom. Something to be so drastically away from from the norm that it's like the comedic relief, but it's weird to give that role to the guy who's being the voice of reason on the show.
Yeah, it's a cool position. It's kind of a cool position that they put him in, because it's almost like, you think that he's, he is so philosophical and everything, but you don't know if he's so out there that he's crazy or if he's just maybe part of the land, or he's part of, you don't know. There's so much mystique to him that, I just think it works perfect for the context of the show. It's such a opposite to the goofy Tim Allen.
We've talked in past episodes about the amount of characters that we're introduced to, like what that sweet spot is, whether it be too many, too few. In this episode, I felt like we were introduced to a lot of characters, but we didn't get to learn much about half of them, which is fine if the show is going to continue on because it gives you some time. But I thought, like, when you really look at how many people we were introduced to episode 1, we really only learned anything about half of them, maybe.
Yeah, it was nice they didn't overkill you with everybody. Nobody had a crazy story you couldn't get behind. They just sort of paint the world pretty well and pretty easy. You get, hey, this is this guy, this is what he's into, this is his family, he works here, those are those people. We'll get to them later. And you sort of just get pulled in for the ride.
Yeah, because we have Tim, who we learn a good amount. And right away with Jill, we kind of have a good assessment of who she is. And I think that's done well. Like I said, maybe they didn't touch on all the kids enough episode 1, but there's time.
That was a 90s thing, though. A lot of old sitcoms, kids were just props.
Yeah.
And you focus on the parents who are the main characters.
But then,
Props
like we
with their
said, too,
shirts
like
off.
Tool time, like with Al, we didn't get a lot of Al. We probably could have got a little bit more Al episode 1, but you have 22 minutes to play with, so I understand.
See, that was only strange because of what we know about the future of the show.
Yeah, I'm
know?
going by the amount
Yeah, I
of
think in the
people we
vacuum
were
that
introduced
doesn't
to.
seem weird.
So when you think of just how many faces we saw versus how many of them got any character development early on. But with Al, I guess even in a limited play, you do know that he's the straight man to Tim on their show. You know that he's going to play the serious role, the antithesis of Tim's zaniness on Tool Time.
I just think it was important to show the two main characters established. Tim is almost toxic masculinity and stuff, but they also show he's willing to change, which is why he goes to Wilson to seek advice. That's why he listens to the advice. That's why he goes on his show and monologues about what happened in his life and apologize. And for someone that masculine, it's obviously not easy to change.
Yeah.
Or apologize. So that's another thing that goes back to why he's likable.
Because there is that redeeming moment at the end of the show, right? Where they're at Tool Time and now he is doing his best job to try to re-explain what he learned from Wilson.
That's the best.
So he may jumble up the message a little bit. It might not be as clear and concise as it should be, but he's trying and he does a decent job redeeming himself, especially, with his wife, where he sincerely apologized to her and used a public platform to do it.
Do you think the TV show is regional? Are we on just in Michigan? Are we on tri-state area scenario? Because they show
I get
watching at
that
home,
vibe.
and then when the guy comes later on,
Tool Time, right?
Tool Time. Yeah, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
100%. Yes. It's that was
Because we don't have like UHF channels anymore, but when we were kids, you can remember things
Right.
like the WLVI 56 Kids Club, right? Like only people.
Weather with Al.
Al Caprillion.
Al Caprillion, yeah.
I'm assuming RIP.
Yeah, I'm under the impression that he is a local celebrity.
Because I love that he gets called out by the handyman who's at the house, who's like, "Hey, is that Tool guy?" Like people around town seem to know him.
Yeah,
But they don't know his name.
So I
That's
wanted,
true.
so I wanted to
Yeah.
get back to that because that's kind of how the show closes, and that with Jill cons Tim like by lure of sex to get into the garage so he can lock him out, to then hire a handyman to fix the dishwasher that he destroyed. Now,
And steals
clever,
his clothes.
and it's fun. It's cheeky. The thing is, like we talked earlier about, like what is Tim's actual skill set as someone who can operate tools. So we were under the impression that he might overdo it at times, but he knows what he's talking about. Whereas here we were stuck in a situation where, all right, he failed, and they have to call in an outside person because he can't fix this on his own.
I think maybe Jill's just punishing him because she knows that would kill him to have somebody else do that.
That's possible too.
Maybe Jill gets off on it. She likes to. This is a sexual game for them. That's what I'm thinking.
I don't think that's what it is,
I didn't
You're
get
wrong,
that
man.
vibe either.
but hey, maybe.
Bunch of prudes.
But did you guys notice when Tim took his shirt off, there was only two people in the studio audience that were like, woo. It's like, it made me
So
crack up.
I
one at
did
home.
want to discuss this because 2 weeks ago we talked about Friends and I corrected Jay on it being a laugh track. And I know both of these shows, Home Improvement and Friends, were shot in front of live studio audiences. But I think that these pilots were not, because they're pilots. This is a test shooting. This is not something that they are at the time aware of being picked up for further episodes. So I think in this instance, I think these shows are being shot in front of laugh tracks instead of live studio audiences. So I did notice a lot of what felt like laugh tracks in this, because I almost felt like the laugh tracks were coming in a second or a half second before they should have. And that's what made me think that it was actually a laugh track.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't get that from it. Like I said, the whole woo thing, it was clearly like one or two people. And then
But also that could be
Laughs
take
are all
7,
different.
right? Where they'd say,
That's
hey,
true.
when Tim takes his shirt off, everybody go, woo. And they keep messing up the
Yeah.
line because they're working with a kid actor. And on take 7 or whatever, there's one lady in the crowd who's still really into Tim Allen with his shirt off. And that's all
She's
that's left there.
She's just hammered and they're just feeding her beer.
Yeah, they're just putting booze in her. And
take it off, baby.
Yeah, it has been a while. So if you need to get one out of your system. So I mean that pretty much closes out the show. So we've discussed everything. I think
we have not discussed everything. We didn't really go over the dishwasher scenario.
we touched on it, and it was
I do want to touch on this because I laughed so hard when he got electrocuted.
Yes.
Oh, me too.
He
The
did
way he
very well.
played that off was just like, it was perfect. He went into the garage to scream alone. It was hysterical. I loved when he got electrocuted.
The
It was a-
hopping.
it was a
got
really good
me.
balance. It was
Yes.
he animated that, but he didn't overdo it.
It wasn't
like,
over embellished. It was, I feel like, an accurate thing to somebody getting like zipped like pretty
Yeah.
good. But they, you're still this kid's dad, right? You wanna be that dad for all. You can't lay on the ground and cry. So he had to hop away, keep his arm behind him. It was hysterical when he got electrocuted.
I also think the funniest line of the whole show was when he said, next, teach you how to treat a severe electrical burn.
Yeah.
That's the best line of the whole show.
And honestly, as far as child actors go, that kid was pretty good. Child actors suck, right?
He actually
Because they're
gets
children.
Oh, wait.
I liked what Mark did. They obviously did a lot of close shots on him because they were probably filming out of sequence and stuff like that just to get him and stuff
sure,
like that.
yeah.
You could tell. But I think overall, he was a pretty decent actor at the time.
looking back at this episode now, do we feel we talked earlier about would the show work today as far as a televised entity? But do we feel that looking at the show, is it still relatable? Is it still realistic within the confines of a sitcom? Is this a show that you think in some modified version works today?
Yes. I don't think they do it right, but I think if they did, it could work today.
I think all of the issues are relatable, right? Like the parenting issues relatable, the job issues relatable, the trying to do things you can't achieve, but you really think you can. It's all relatable. I think they do a good job. Is it a little dated? Sure, but I don't think it. See, I found this less dated than Friends.
Oh, for sure. I feel the same way.
It
Yes.
seems way more evergreen and sort of timeless.
That whole
Yeah.
show is unrelatable is the problem. It's all just about relationships. This dives way more into just like actual life.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to family dynamic, right, the world will change, but for the most part, your relationship with your parents, with your spouse, there's a lot of things that are timeless as far as that goes. And
Exactly. Yeah.
so I think there's a lot of relatable stuff that, as we watch the show now in our 30s versus as kids, we can still watch this and connect with the Tim character on a different level than we were able to as kids. And we just found it entertaining back then. I think the show definitely holds up as far as the test of time, and like whether that means it could run again in a new version, who knows? But this show certainly has legs and it holds up.
So let's just go around the horn from there, I guess, right?
Yes, and I will add this. It would be fantastic if they could find themselves on some sort of a streaming service. For those of you who are,
Oh my
Agreed,
god.
yes.
it is
Yeah.
incredibly difficult to find Home Improvement and be able to watch it unless you want to pay $2 an episode.
I think this is a Disney licensing issue at the moment. I believe you will see it on Disney at one point.
Yeah, they
I
bought
mean-
Fox and Fox owned it, I believe.
No, ABC. It was an ABC show, and ABC has that link with Disney. So hopefully it's a
Right,
Disney
but
Plus
if you
show.
notice, it's a Buena Vista show, which is
Oh,
the
yeah.
Magic Kingdom logo. So
Yeah.
it is related to Disney and something else, which I think is the problem.
because I will say
It
if
shouldn't
you
be
have to pay
it
a
shouldn't be
couple
music
dollars-
rights. I said I wouldn't imagine it's music rights with this. Like Drew Carey is a classic issue, right? Where like you can't stream Drew Carey anywhere because there's
Yeah.
so much music in it. They just
Yeah.
don't want to pay for it. But Home
Yeah,
Improvement,
and
aside
it could maybe, and
there's
who
a few
knows, someone
music
might have
things.
it, and it's, let's say Disney has it, they might want to just be spacing out their big content to like keep
True.
people around. Because if you want to pay to rent or buy on like your Xfinity or whatever, if you get into this show, it's 204 episodes. Like,
No, they wouldn't put that on Disney Plus. They would go on Hulu or something. And all the stuff that we said like is borderline, Disney's against. And
yeah, that's true. But because I don't personally want to spend upwards of $500 renting every episode.
Well,
We're
you
only
don't
dealing
have
with
to
episode
because
one.
you can
Yeah.
get the Home Improvement box set on eBay for $50.
Which I did look at because,
Oh, that's
like
a
I said,
good
we
deal.
watched all of it last year, and I want to watch it again. So it was streaming somewhere. It was on Hulu, maybe.
Nick, is that Blu-ray?
No,
VHS.
it looks no, it just looks like DVD, but each different
house,
set
right?
comes in a different like custom box, and so they go up from there. So like you can get like the really nice, and it's a toolbox
I was
basically.
gonna say,
It's
if
a
it's
small
not like a
toolbox.
Binford toolbox, then they,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
so
severely messed up.
it's a toolbox that you can get in like really good condition. Like you can get it on Walmart new for $85. So, but you can get it used on eBay for 50 and stuff like that. So you're
I
in the
get a-
range of being able to afford.
Can I get
this
one
if
that
you
comes with a DVD player?
really-
Do you not have a DVD player anymore, or at least a Blu-ray
No,
player?
it's 2021.
You have a PlayStation and an Xbox and a
They
fucking,
don't play normal DVDs. They
That's
only
a-
play Blu-rays.
That's a lie.
Really?
That's a lie.
Yeah.
He's
It
wrong.
doesn't seem
He's-
right to me.
He's
I don't play video
100%
games,
wrong.
that seems
I'm
wrong.
not wrong. I've tried.
You know,
Did
you're
you
wrong.
put a like a ROM in there or something? Did you use like a floppy
No,
disk? Did
they-
you put the wrong thing in?
DVD-RW. Just fucking,
It's
No, what
dead
happened
technology.
was he put
Was
the
it an
disc.
HD DVD?
He put the disc in his hot dog toaster.
No, because it's already full of hot dogs. I would not make that mistake.
your Xbox is already full of hot dogs.
I don't have an Xbox. I don't own trash systems.
Okay, nerd.
Well, all right. So, anyways, so we've said our piece with the show. Time to go around. Is this a show you would greenlight or cancel? Gordo, I'm going to start with you.
100%. I loved everything about it. I like the campy joke. I like the good parenting, the odd neighbors, philosophy, the kind of, this definitely has legs. It should definitely run.
Ferg?
Oh yeah, definitely. For a show that's with all the slapstick and everything, it was surprisingly deep, and I would love to see more.
Joe?
Yeah, it's got everything, right? I know it's gonna be hard for me. I'm gonna be the person who says yes to almost everything just because I love terrible sitcoms. But this is a good version of a good terrible sitcom. It's kind of the perfect sitcom of that time, and I think the nostalgia of when it came out, right, obviously plays a bit into it. But I would love if he said, "Hey, we're gonna redo this, and I'm Wilson now. Let's redo it." Like that'd be so happy.
No, I would be so upset.
I don't know.
Remakes
could be
are
folksy.
always bad.
Do you think Tim Allen's ever eaten a
different
squirrel?
comedy today? You couldn't remake that. It wouldn't be good. Even
We'll
if
put
they
it
were
on
still
HBO Max,
edgy,
no,
it
no,
would
no.
be terrible.
You would have to focus more on tool time, I think, and let that be the meat of the show.
No, I feel like that's what they would do, but it's not what you should do.
What about like a Larry Sanders show type show where it's just Tool Time and then it's the backstage at Tool Time and then it's Tool Time? That would be an interesting show.
I would only watch it if they replaced if Tim Allen is the Wilson, I would want George Lopez to be the Tim Allen.
One
They-
weird note I wanted to bring up too, I forgot about. So when I used to work putting up garage doors, like when we were in high school, one of the companies that we dealt with a lot, like just a company makes garage doors, their spokesperson was Al, like Richard Karn. So every box, like one out of every 3 work days, you were spending all day just pulling out all these giant boxes with Al Borland smiling.
Yes,
at you.
I know that company because they had him on the back of the trucks as if the door was open.
Yep,
And
Wayne
he's
Dalton.
like, yes. Oh man, I forgot about that company.
And Nick, to continue on, how do you feel about the show? Would you greenlight or cancel?
Aside from the fact that this show checks all the boxes, I'm definitely greenlighting. This show hit very close to home for me. I kind of, my dad was a similar to Tim Allen type of guy, so I resonated very much with this show, and I'm very upset that this is not on a streaming service and that I would have to go to Daily Motion on my computer every time I wanted to watch it. But I want to keep watching the show. I love this show. 100% greenlight.
So-
we don't endorse piracy.
So to bring it to me, also with all of you guys, I love the show. Even from episode 1, watching it, it hits right away. I just think the comedy's there. It's a fun element. The tool time aspect of it is super intriguing to me, and I really like that about the show. And would want to see more of it. I want to get to this point where we're going to be a little more controversial with our decisions, but I think we picked such mammoth shows early on.
It's
where
coming,
it's
Jay,
tough to
don't
go
worry.
against the grain. But yeah, I think there'll be more disputing to come. Overall, 5 for 5 on Home Improvement. Great show. And congratulations, Home Improvement. We give you the green light. Yeah, one last time before I close it. Get it out of your system. So, anyways, that's it for this week. Thank you, everyone, for listening to S1E1. Any more information on us you want, you can go to s1e1pod.com. That will link you to everywhere where you can find us to play our podcast. That'll link you to all of our social media. So catch us there. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next week. And